is only a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. She is a living presence in their spiritual earthbound plane.
Hello and welcome to episode 41 of the Talking to the Dead podcast. This week I'm going to visit something quite incredible. It's called the Melaten Cemetery. It's probably the biggest cemetery in Cologne, and it is still used. It's very much a living cemetery. People have been buried here for a long, long time. And the cemetery itself started work as a proper modern cemetery in 1810. But in the Middle Ages, it was a terrible place, and there was an awful lot of execution and death. And I think in 1529, there were very famous Protestants that were burned there. And in the 17th century, over 30 women and girls were killed as potential witches. And it wasn't really until about 1797 the last person on Melaten, a church robber, was executed, and it was a huge public spectacle at the time. Melaten is a word based on a French word for being sick, malade, and from the 12th century, Melaten was the place where all the lepers were kept. So I'm intrigued to see what remains of that. It was one of the 4 or 5 huge leper colonies in the Cologne region. And anyone who was considered a leper had to live there. Some very strange history, which I'll let you do on your own, because lepers weren't necessarily, although outcasts, weren't necessarily poor. There was quite a lot of money sloshing around in the leper community, and you had to be reasonably wealthy to be able to be put into this leper colony. They were looked after. They had maids. There was even an inn there selling beer, and they had a lot of help with food, as well as having a farm and an orchard. They just were refused the ability to leave that area, and in those days, the Melaten Cemetery area was outside of the city walls, very much like the Friedenhof we went to the other day. So this was a very sad place where people were kept, and I think people who had leprosy in those days, and probably even now in some countries where leprosy still happens, they were kept in complete isolation from the population and very cruelly treated, and that's probably since the days of prehistory, since before Christ. To be a leper was always considered to be an outcast from society. An interesting parallel to the Giesenfriedhof we went to, there were a lot of Protestants buried because they weren't allowed to be buried in the Melaten Cemetery where the Catholics were buried. And it was the same with Jewish people. They had to be buried in their own cemetery. So this was a predominantly Catholic cemetery. So it'll be quite interesting to see what feelings I get there. So the Melaten Cemetery is very well known in Cologne as being pretty haunted. And that's kind of the reason I wanted to go, because I'm very interested to see what sort of spirits are still around. And yes, it has a very bloody past, and it has an awful past of being a leprosy colony and, a tremendous amount of suffering. So yes, it's probably not the nicest experience to feel that, but still it's history. And as it's still a functioning cemetery, I'm sure there's a lot more up-to-date feeling there as well. So I hope you'll enjoy this week's episode. I'm going to pack up and go there soon. It's only about 20 minutes bicycle ride from where I am now. And next time you hear me, I will be in Melaten. So here I am in Melaten Cemetery. I arrived and put my bicycle straight in front of the small chapel, which is probably the only existing structure that I can see at the moment from the 13th century. And luckily it was open, and there was somebody in there, and they were preparing for a funeral service. So, which would surprise me, because the website most definitely said that it's closed except on Sundays. So I was very lucky. I'm very pleased that I managed to get into it. So it's quite an amazing place, and I'll use the photograph I took as the picture for this episode. It has an existing wooden ceiling, they told me. It's been refurbished over the years, I suppose, but a lot of atmosphere in there, used for concerts, exhibitions, and for funerals now. But very nice to be in there, very simple, very plain, but as I said, a lot of atmosphere. So after that, I decided to walk around because I wanted to find the old houses where the lepers used to be. I found a really ancient map, and I could see that it was slightly about 50 meters away from the church, going, I think, sort of going south. But so far I can't see anything. What I've seen really are newish graves, or graves that go back to the First World War at the oldest, really. Very grand. I mean, you really do seem to be able to show your wealth in terms of your headstones. Massive headstones, some almost as big as houses, others much smaller and much more modest. But I eventually was drawn to a particular corner, which I'm now sitting in, and it seems to be, I don't know what else to call it, but the kids' corner. And there was a mother, I think, clearly, and another mother, and they were sitting on a bench and they were talking together in front of these graves. And I had a quick look, and I took a photograph, but I moved away to a quieter place where they can't see me. And so many of these graves are dated 2024. But what's really astonishing about it is that most of these kids died the same day that they were born. And I'm sitting right next door to one now, and it's got the name Frisch on it, Eric and Gabby, and they were born on the 8th of December 66, and the 9th of they died on the 8th of December 66, and one died on the 9th of December 66. So it really sounds like twins who were born maybe very early and they died. It's very poignant to me. For many reasons. And so many of the graves here are the same story, born almost the same day as they died. And some slightly older, but what a tragedy. And this really made me feel that, and I could sense that so strongly. I could feel these children, and the children were very dominant in my thinking, I think, when I was in the Giesenfriedenhof, last week when I was in the Dome. And now, again, children resting here in this very, very beautiful cemetery. I can only describe it as being like Central Park for the dead. It is massive, beautiful, beautiful mature trees, hundreds of years old. It's a wonderful, wonderful park, and probably had it not been for the fact that it's a cemetery, it would be full of people here enjoying the summer's day. But as it is, I'm one of the very few people I can see here. And it's very, very still. I wish to move on and see if I can find anything that's left of the former leper colony. Well, I've been moving around quite a lot. Funny thing happened. I thought I was walking probably south, away from the entrance from the church, and I went around in corners. I must have got lost, and instead of going the opposite direction, I actually went completely back to the way I came, and I walked straight back into the church again. I had this really disconcerting feeling at that point. It was a bit like a deja vu moment. But anyway, I've done a little bit more walking, and while I was walking along, I was concentrating on Titan and asking him if he'd like to pop in and help me get in touch with some people, because I think it would be really nice if perhaps if I could do anything to pass any messages on. And I wanted to find somewhere that was nice, and I've settled on this little place, really to the far west of the cemetery. As I said, nearly all the graves here seem to be now 19th century to 20th century and 21st century. They've done a very good job, really, of cleaning it all up over the years. It was actually a strange story because I was in another grave with my family the other day, and I just noticed the same thing. Why isn't there the same type of ages like in the Gießenfriesenhof? And my wife said, well, obviously in Germany it's very different. It's not expensive particularly to have a grave plot in Germany, but you only get it for a certain amount of time. And it can be completely dismantled and dug up within the lifetime of the people who put the person in the ground, if they want it that way or they don't really care anymore. All the graves are immaculately looked after here. I mean, there's such beautiful flowers, and they've all got little advertising signs on them showing who's doing it, these companies that come around and do it. And as I felt in the Gießenfriesenhof, the people who must have put all that work into creating that cemetery, I get the real signs here because it's just full of people, real people working very hard. I saw people digging up graves that are no longer needed, taking away the side stones, and digging all the soil out again, and there's nothing left now. So I suppose maybe it makes sense. What's the point of keeping a valuable space if nobody really wants to visit? Which was kind of my feeling last time, was that I think a grave is only useful as a memorial if there's energy there still from either the people who remember you or the people who, for whatever reason, enjoyed being in that spot, or the energy that was residual in their bodies when they died. Beyond that, there is obviously no point, and maybe the Germans have got it right. You just dig it up and throw it all away and put a new person in. Yes, it does sound a bit bleak, doesn't it? So we're on the edge of the road here because it's a sort of a square plot, a very large plot of land. And as I told you, it's right really now in the sort of city centre, even though in those olden days it was just on the outside the city walls. So I'm now sitting very nicely in the sunshine, or cloudy sunshine, and you can hear all the traffic and you can hear the wind, and I'm sitting in front of 7 graves that seem to have been all laid between the year 2000 2021, and again, as I said, it's astonishing to me just how many old graves do not exist anymore. There's very little sign here that this was a leper colony. I can't find anything that refers to it at all, not even a sign. So it's all been erased from history. But the history is there. So without further ado, let's see if we can get Titan to pop by. Okay, I know Titan is here and bursting with energy as usual. I'm just trying to think about some things myself. But Titan's immediately telling me that I should be completely privileged to be sitting where I'm sitting, because she knows that I'm not a great follower of German pop culture. But she said some of the people buried here are very, very famous cultural, medical, pop icons in Germany. She said it will mean absolutely nothing to you, but they are. And she said it's quite amusing that a number of them are around, popping their energy out, wanting to wave at me and wanting to get me to greet them. So I will greet you all. I'm really sorry, I don't know who you are. I didn't know who you were in your life. But I want to show my respect to you and my pleasure at being here. I hope that there's something I can do. At that point, I feel the sun on my face. And there's a lady who's here, and she actually wants to come and sit next to me, which is fine. I can't really see her, but I can feel her. And she said she was a singer, an opera singer, and she is buried somewhere in this cemetery. And she said she loved doing open-air concerts. It was one of the pleasures of her life to sing in front of a large crowd in the open air in the sunshine. And she's giving me all this energy now. She's showing me, in my mind's eye, her standing there on a stage, singing with the sun on her face and people adoring her. And it's a very strong image here. Yeah, it's lovely to feel that. Now, I did promise myself that I would try not to be too specific about names and things on the graves, because obviously a lot of the people who are buried here, their relations are still alive, and I wouldn't want to say anything that might hurt them, and I might be completely wrong, but I must say it because I'm sitting opposite Francesco Fontana. He was born in the 26th of January 1987, and it's funny because, again, numbers, that number means something to me. Not particularly 87, but certainly 26th of January. And he died on the 20th of October 2016. And it says on his grave, forgive my terrible pronunciation because it must be in Italian, I think, "Tu sei sempre nei nostri pensieri, il tuo sorriso rimarrà sempre vivo nei nostri." Now, I'm not a scholar of Italian or Latin for that matter, but whatever, this chap is basically telling me that how he died, and I just thought I'd mention it. He died of a drug overdose. That's what's coming to me, and I'm really sorry, Francesco. And it's obviously that he wanted to tell me that, and maybe it's somebody else, but that's what I'm pointing at. And but he's fine. His spirit moved on long ago, but he says that he does enjoy coming here. People still come to visit his grave, so he still apportions a part of his huge amounts of eternal energy here. And there's even a picture of him on his gravestone, which is sort of like a half moon almost. And if I look a bit closer to him, let me see if I can go a bit closer there. Yes, he was a young man, short cut black hair and a beard, a nice smiley face. Seemed to be a very nice young man, and I'm really sorry that something really tragic happened to you. I've got opposite Maria Franconi and Andioli, a nice photograph on her as well. A lovely lady, full of hair and glasses and a dark jacket. She was born way after me. Sorry, 22nd of January 1971. Another major milestone for me. 22nd of January. That was the birth date of my son. 20 years later, my son was born on this. And she died on the 14th of February 2023, not an old lady. And I have Norbert Weich. He was born in 1943 and he died in 2021. So I think, Norbert, you've had a good life. He tells me he did. He had a great life. Gisela Becker is here. She was born in 1932, 19th of October, and she died on the 21st of March in 2024. And really the others are all that sort of age, 1930s they were born and they died in the last few years. Another 1931 to 1979. So not everyone is young. There's some really older people here as well. And what is very, very noticeable in this cemetery, and I saw it in the other cemeteries I've been to, families have their huge plots and the big stones, and you see sometimes some vacant areas ready for the people who are still alive to be put in the grave as well. So yeah, it's a funny feeling when you see how death is treated by us as an end, and people are laid to rest, and that whole sense. But in fact, nothing could be further than the truth. And Titan is actually laughing, and she's saying that if there's anything that I've learned in the last 40 odd weeks of doing this podcast, is that there is no death. There is never any form of death. There is always that energy. It's just a transformation of energy into another form. And again, I'm getting that very strongly here. There is a person who's come along, and he is a school teacher, was a school teacher. He's buried here. He's telling me about his funeral, and he remembers that there were so many people who came, and so many old pupils and old colleagues from his school. He said it was a lovely moment for him to see it, because he could see it, and he thought it was a wonderful funeral that he had, and he just wanted to mention to me that it does mean a lot to him and to maybe other people if they have a funeral where many people come and remember. He's saying that he didn't want a funeral that people would be sad about. He wanted a fun celebration where people could come and feel happy to see each other and remember him in a positive way. And he's very insistent on telling me that, typical teacher. And he wants me to pass that on to you listeners, that when you consider your funeral, and when your relations consider your funeral, think about just trying to have not so much a happy occasion, he says, but an occasion where you invite as many people as you can, even if they weren't close family and friends, just to celebrate your life. He says it does an awful lot for the energy and for the people who are left behind, which is a nice thought. Now I'm feeling the heat of the sun, and I'm smelling some smoky smell. I can't tell you if it's as trite as to say that I'm having something to do with a burnt witch. But Titan is saying most definitely terrible things did happen in this area, not where I'm sitting, but nearer the front gates, and more on the eastern side of this cemetery plot. She says where I'm sitting now used to be the farm and the orchard, but right at the front there near the church was the place where the public executions took place. Again, there is no sense of that now. You can't feel it. But I can feel that. I can feel the burning. I can feel the heat. I can sense the terrible inhumanity of that, and what was left behind. And in fact, I'm hearing, I think it's a woman's voice saying, we didn't do it. It wasn't true. She's saying that many of us were not witches. We weren't even interested in any form of black magic. We just had a problem with some people, and they were more powerful than us. And in order to get us out of the way, they could condemn us as being a witch and have us burned. And there's another person here. He says that he's from long ago, many hundreds of years ago, and he said that he was here at the time that this was a leper colony. So that's good. So Titan, please help me with this person, because I'm finding it quite hard to communicate with him. He's wanting to tell me that there's such a contrast between where I'm sitting now and how it was really in the 13th century when this was a leper colony. He said that there were a lot of people here who weren't actually lepers at all. They pretended to be lepers. And they did that because there was a lot of fortune, he says, to be made. There was a lot of business in terms of people who could be, people who could be, there were people who would say that you're a leper. There was an organization that would decide if you're a leper or not, And if that society or group of people decided you were a leper, you were then put into a leper colony and you had no choice. And your family had to come up with the money. And I think this is one of those people. He says to me, my family wanted to get rid of me. They wanted to steal my money. And so they falsely had me diagnosed as a leper. And they paid the organization here to keep me here, which was like a prison. And I was there for 15 years. And in that entire time, I never left this ground. I never saw my family again. But I was maintained, I was given food and drink, I was given somewhere to sleep. But I had a horrible time because I was so cruelly and unfairly put here. I'm sorry to hear that. And he said, no, he said, I'm sorry, but it's often the history of the time. He says that he could look back at a time, although it would be the same as looking at today. But in terms of history, my history, he says, there were so many awful things that happened hundreds of years ago. But he says, don't forget, there are an awful lot of very bad things happening to people now. People are often killing people for money. Families are betraying family for inheritance. And he said there are many people here who've suffered these tremendous indignities in life and are buried here. And the leper colony, he said, was just an example of the cruelty of some people. He said there were obviously genuine cases of people with leprosy, but he said it was very much overplayed. He said that the disease itself was just not understood, and he said that it wasn't in fact that contagious. He said people wouldn't get it just from seeing you or walking past you, but there was such fear because people were so scared in those days. It was a bacterial infection, and there was no cure. Yes, I have heard that, and I heard that it's only in the last, I suppose, 50, 60, something odd years that there has been a cure. And saying, yes, there is a cure now that involves antibiotic treatments, and it is extremely rare. But in those days, he said, the hygiene was very bad, and people could contract leprosy, and people were very scared about the way we looked, and that was probably one of the biggest fears. And so we were put into this place, and we were kept away from everyone. He said he's had children as well, and he never saw his children again. He believes his children were told that he had gone mad, and he couldn't ever be seen again. I'm sorry to hear about that. At about the same time that I was talking to that chap, another man came over to me. He was actually wagging his finger at me, almost saying I mustn't give the wrong impression about this place. He says that so much history is here, and you're talking about something that happened in the 13th century. He said, but most people here have been buried more recently than that, and all that has been erased, and most of what is left here, the energy, is from recent burials. And he said, please emphasize that now this graveyard is a center for good energy. And yes, it's true. And I thank you for correcting me. You're right. I can't say that it's bad just because something happened hundreds of years ago. This cemetery is even older than the Cologne Dome, and it's one of the oldest cemeteries in the world, in Germany, in the world. But you wouldn't know it anymore because it's full of much younger people, and they've been well cared for, and many of them have had very happy lives, and are very happy to be here, and for their relatives still to visit them, which is good. So I just had a feeling that I need to walk again, because there's some other people nearby, and I think they're going to lead me to where to sit. Well, I went for a nice little walk again, and I can see why I was being taken that way. I felt that Titan was wanting to show me this particular, I can only describe it as being almost like Millionaire's Row. It's like a central promenade that goes, it seems, almost from, I have to get my compass out to check it again, which direction it is. Yes, it goes from west to east, straight down the middle of the cemetery. And in the middle of the Millionaire's Row, there seems to be a circular park area with a modern art sculpture, which almost looks like a person silhouette cut within a concrete plinth. But my goodness, the graves on left and right, I presume those are all the stars and the really super famous and very wealthy people, because each one is just magnificent and almost the size of a small house. One of them even just was an amazing work of art, and it didn't have any names or any inscriptions on it at all, completely blank, which I think is very cool. And I felt that. And others were very, very glamorous and with massive crosses or big inscriptions. So yes, a tremendous walk. And I turned off that promenade, and now I'm sitting at another clearing facing west. And I've got all sorts of people in front of me, doctors. I went past people who were lawyers. Very, very rarely, though, do you actually see people putting that on their stone, which I think is a bit sad. And Titan is actually saying that to me. That's probably where I got that feeling. It's funny how anonymous people are in death here, and yet in life they meant so much more. And Titan is saying again, it seems to be that strange fixation that we have, that when you die, basically that's it. Everything that was you has gone, but it's not. And I'm feeling that very strongly sitting here with Dr. Friedrich Mead and his wife Doris. He died in 1991. That, as a successful doctor, and he says that he was actually a children's doctor, and in his life he had so much pleasure, and it was so rewarding in the things that he did and the lives that he saved and the goodness that he did. But it is true, he said, that not many of his colleagues in this cemetery will ever say what they were doing, because in a way it was considered to be almost irrelevant, because once you were dead, you were dead, and apart from those people who could remember you, that's it. Yes, and I am really drawn to those graves that do have more than just a bare stone, that have a picture or some inscription or something, or even a few lines of a poem. It shows to me something a little bit more caring and a little bit more of a memory. But there's not a lot of that about. It really is almost the barest possible inscriptions. I'm on my right, I have Sommer, it says at the top, with a cross. Then on the left, in smaller writing, Marianne, 1921 to 2013. And on the right, Hans Roland, 1915 to 1986. This is a nice one. Right behind me, it says Ewig findet die Liebe dich, which is a little nice, loving thing to say. And it was Bertha Geborn Hassen, I think, 1851 until 1906, and there's 6 people in that one particular grave. There you go, lots of it around. So yeah, that's a nice thing to think about, is that why not celebrate those who you loved for what they achieved in their life, in death as well. There's nothing wrong with that. It seems to be quite a nice thing to do. Titan is saying that's another lesson for me and the readers and the listeners to take on board, is that when you die and as a human you pass your energy over to your next life, and the energy that was you, the human energy, massively dissipates and disappears with your body, but your spiritual energy is still very, very strong, and it's the same as it always was. It never goes. But maybe for that reason she says that it's in the human history, this idea that human energy is what's important because it's alive, and when that human energy is gone, it's not important anymore. Well, that's an interesting point. But in a way, I'm sitting here in a Catholic cemetery, and I fully expect the people who were buried here and the people who buried them here must have had some faith that there would be life everlasting, or that they would be raised at the final trumpet or something like that. Yeah, it does seem incredibly minimalist, that there is no real sense of the memory of all the memories, because that's what makes life. Yeah, and that's what I felt Titan saying to me. It's memories that make life. She says the last thought really for this afternoon, which is something which is worth mentioning, is that in this cemetery there are thousands and thousands of graves, but hardly any of the people who were buried here left much energy behind. And she says that's why you're feeling really not a lot here. And it is true. I'm not really feeling that much. I feel a bit drawn here and there. I obviously had a sense earlier that I could talk to a couple, but most of it is just like a field. It's a field of stones. The memories have gone. The people are not here visiting. You can sense again what I probably felt at the beginning, which is why I suppose the Germans and maybe other countries do the same. They just dig up the graves after a period of time, and put somebody else in there, and this whole circle keeps going on, repeating itself. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with that, but maybe it's more contradicting my feeling that it's really important to remember people and to remember what they did and to celebrate that life. And Titan is saying that is true, but it's not particularly the way that the human condition has evolved. And equally, most people live for now. They live in the present. They live for their family. They live for their future. And they move through their lives. And they don't see much utility in the dead anymore. Okay, well, there we are. That's really all I feel I want to say. Thank you very much for listening. I've had a wonderful afternoon here. It's lovely to see the living and the dead here. And so until next week, goodbye.